When it became clear that the V&A wanted to address the topic of circular economy, it was a chance to reflect on the way the institution had been managing its own building stock. The Aston Webb Screen was built in 1909 to hide the boiler room of the V&A. In 2013, the screen has been transformed into the porous entrance we see today. Through this process, the entire screen has been dismantled and rebuilt, and leaving on the side these 400 stones. Through the course of serendipities and surely goodwill and risk-taking, this collection of stone had been salvaged and we're sitting in Mark's quarry in Dorset. It felt quite appropriate for these stones to make a comeback to the V&A and become a testimony through their presence of the possibilities of material recirculation.
Purbec's quite complicated because there's lots of different beds, well, over a very short geographic distance. So there are different quarry holes that are quite short in duration, and then the quarry premises with the masonry works that's been there for decades. The quarry and masonry works was set up by my grandfather, and then my father took over the business and ran it with my mum. When they retired, actually before they retired, my brother then took it over and has run it ever since. So it's been in my family since after the Second World War as a business. I was thinking, my dad was saying that with his long and first-hand knowledge of the quarrying industry, and he says really that, since the ancient world, the main difference in masonry processes has been the internal combustion engine. Which you wouldn't necessarily think has anything to do with it, but actually that's absolutely been my experience of the last few weeks, where to have an excavator have an incredible 6-metre reach with a pair of nylon strops that can carry an incredible weight, and to be able to just lightly and delicately extract these stones from the pile. We've never had more power over materials than we do right now. I think, that's an interesting moment. If we're thinking that these stones are just in a state of pause from being, 160 million years, is it, with Portland series, to then having 100 years of them being in the domain of man's building materials. I think, in 100 years, it's interesting to think how the attitude to reconfiguring buildings, the effort and energy and methodology of actually moving them and altering them, how much that will change.
No code. This one looks very clean. Almost looks like new stone.
You know what I wondered also about that notch?
Clean.
Yep.
There's another type.
That one?
No.
Type 2.
Type 2 right.
Yep. The way that my brother ended up with the Aston Webb leftover materials is one of those flukes of chance, because the quarry's got no formal business relationship with salvage. It's not actually a salvage business at all. It was just through a contact, actually. So a guy I used to know from years ago when I was at university and worked at the pub up the road, and he has worked at the Science Museum since graduating, and the Science Museum had let a storage facility to the V&A for the residual Aston Webb material after the Mandela project. It was costing them money to store it, and they didn't need it. The other masonry works that's run by Haysom Purbeck Stone is out at St Aldham's Head, and the quarry there is within the Purbeck Portland horizon. So that geological horizon extends across to the Isle of Portland, and within it, it breaks down into different beds that are quarried over a different time. But broadly speaking, it is a material in common. So that's, I think, partly why Mark was interested in this stone in the first place, is that it's like almost like the first cousin of the Purbeck Portland.
Through the years, we developed a specific interest in reuse of building components. What happens with the materials when a building is demolished? Where does the new products come from? How does a waste sorting plant works? What is obsolescence? For us, all possible ways to investigate these questions were interesting. 100 years ago, it was something completely mainstream. Actually, every contractor or every company active in the building sector was contributing to reuse. And somewhere in the middle of the 20th century, this whole practice collapsed. And from a mainstream practice, it became a niche activity. There is an effort in terms of recycling that has been done the last decades. Materials are being crushed or melted to become secondary raw materials, but the fact of being able to keep components as they are is something that the building sector has lost. From what we've seen in Belgium, but also in France, in the Netherlands and in the UK, there is a specific tradition of reusing stony materials. If you look at sets or cobblestones for streets, but also floorings, all kind of architectural ornaments in stone, there is a really long tradition of reclaiming stone, and that is still the case today. But as you see here, we almost everything in a building can be potentially reused if the dismantling is possible, and if there is a will or a quality that somehow legitimates the efforts we put in it.
The multi-project started in 2016, and for Rotor it was one of the first times that we were acting as a circular economy consultant. We set a goal of 2%, so this means that 2% of all the elements integrated into the renovation of the tower had to be reclaimed once.
We quickly decided that this blue limestone needed to be preserved. Part of this blue limestone needed to be removed from the building, and these ones were carefully dismantled in order to be reused.
In the 60s, the developer of this tower, together with the architect, they wanted these kinds of building projects not to just be building projects, but they wanted them to be a kind of emancipator of the Belgian industry as well. And these stones are a pretty good example of this because, I mean, they have been mined in Belgium, they have been treated in Belgium, and they have this inherent quality that makes them so valuable.
The contractor had to invent a way to get them intact on the ground floor, which was not so easy.
So we are in La Carrière du Clipot, a quarry of Belgian bluestone in Soigny. It's one of the quarries of the group Carrière de la Pierre Bleue Belge, which is a Belgian family company. So with my brother and sister, we are the current generation managing this company. So we used to say, I don't know if it's still the case, but there were 1 cubic meter of stone in each house in Belgium. If you go around the city here in Soigny, there is bluestone everywhere. Here in Soigny, everybody has somebody who works in the family who works in the quarry. Not only in ours, and there are many quarries around. When do they start? We try hard to have them finish their secondary school. But before, like 40 years ago, they were most of them didn't finish the primary school. So they were starting really early. We still have workers who started when they were 14. It's important also to have people who can evolve, as you were saying. And but what we try to do, especially with the young ones, is to make them change from one place to another and learn the different parts of the activities and also the different sectors. Because if you go to the quarry, you know more about the product. If you work in the factory, you know more what the customer wants, and it's good to know everything. Because then, when the customer asks you something impossible, when you haven't worked in the quarry, you can't say, "Oh no, I can't have you can't have a 5 by 5 meter slab. That doesn't exist." But if you haven't been in the quarry, you don't know that. So it's important that they go everywhere. And some other ones, they want to evolve, and so they become the team leader or more technical. If they have more technical skills, then we send them to the Pôle de la Pierre, and we try. We have some who have been there to improve in technical skills. So yeah, there is a very many opportunities to evolve within the company. When the steam engine arrived, that was a big change, and then when the electricity arrived, that was a big change. But that's just to make the process easier, but that didn't change the skills. We still have to know where to find the stone, how to cut it in the quarry, to waste the least, and the same for the whole process. And at the end, it's still the eye of the human that decides if it's good or not. It comes from the beginning till the end, because at the end the eyes are so important. You know, they have to see if there are any default or anything that should not be in the finished product. So that's super important. And what's super important too is that they draw the lines properly in the quarry for the machines to go at the right place. So there are different skills and very exciting jobs at different places. But I can see many share on Facebook things they are not supposed to share, but they do because they are so proud of the machines and they show the machines and those big loaders. So it's another type of interest.
Ce que je trouve intéressant, c'est que la pierre, en tant qu'objet technique, devienne un objet culturel et qu'en même temps, elle ait un enregistrement tout à fait naturel, c'est-à-dire, c'est jamais que la trace d'un paléo-environnement, en fait, hein, c'est une accumulation de ce qui s'est passé à un moment T dans l'histoire de notre planète. Et c'est ça qui est intéressant avec l'objet pierre, que nous n'avons pas avec d'autres objets comme... bon, je ne vais pas mettre en compétition d'autres matériaux, mais... Alors maintenant, au niveau de la circularité, c'est vrai que c'est un débat qui nous intéresse. Pourquoi? Parce qu'on voit que le marché, de toute façon, est en train de changer et qu'en même temps, favoriser la circularité de notre propre matériau déjà mis en œuvre, ça nous permet de garder, en tout cas, un marché. Mais en tout cas, toute la filière devrait alors être repensée. Donc, pour moi, cette espèce de circularité est tout à fait pertinente. Mais il faut réorganiser le métier, comme vous le dites, mais pas seulement le métier de la carrière, mais également tout ce qu'il y a ensuite. Donc l'entrepreneur aussi doit être, et également les municipalités, par exemple, si on doit déconstruire un chantier urbain et qu'ils doivent revenir ici, ben, ça ne dépendra pas seulement de notre réorganisation, mais c'est vraiment toute la filière qui doit être réorganisée. Alors, je vais revenir peut-être sur un point qui est intéressant pour vous. Au niveau du réemploi, il y a des essais qui devraient être faits sur le matériau réemployé. Je trouve ça normal que l'on puisse proposer au customer une garantie, en tout cas de performance, par rapport à un matériau qui serait réemployé. Le problème, c'est que les normes d'essai ne sont pas faites pour un matériau de réemploi. Par exemple, pour la flexion, il faut des prismes qui font 30 cm de longueur. Or, vous pouvez avoir un pavé et vous ne saurez tout simplement pas faire un échantillon ou refaire un échantillon de cette dimension requise par la norme européenne pour faire l'essai. Donc, ça n'a pas été prévu en fait. Donc, il y a un vide dans lequel il faut organiser quelque chose en tout cas pour donner quand même une garantie au client final que le matériau de réemploi reste conforme par rapport à ce qui doit être prescrit. Malheureusement, je crois que notre façon de penser occidentale n'est pas encline à accepter ce genre de précepte de base en fait. Hein, que la pierre, étant donné qu'elle a été mise en œuvre pendant un siècle, 2 siècles peut-être, ben, elle a fait ses preuves et qu'elle pourrait revivre ailleurs. Bon, malheureusement, c'est une des pierres d'achoppement dans le système.
On one hand, the arrival of the engine has facilitated the work of the stonemasons, but simultaneously also eased the mechanization of the destruction of the stones. So recycling can be regarded as a large-scale, very energy-demanding, organized destruction of building components. The approach is to transform specificity into generic matter. Our approach is to work with these specificities. A careful work on the surfaces of the stone, cleaning, dressing, cutting, rubbing, has re-prepared the stones. But we can easily imagine that this art of re-preparing, redressing a stone would inform a more contemporary practice that is a very concrete part of circular economy.
So, and everything's quite clearly marked, is it? No. Sorry.
What is less obvious is the embedded efforts invested in the quarrying of these stones as blocks, and also the expertise and labor of the stonemasons when the Aston Webb Screen was built. So in this case, they were made 100 years ago. It will represent a significant number of days to quarry, extract these stones from the Isle of Portland and carve them, shape them and transport them to London. This work would have left marks and it would have shaped the body of the stonemasons throughout their careers as well. This labor is maybe something that we could call a human tool, and it is also embedded in the stone in a certain way.
Non, je n'ai plus le vertige de la carrière, ça. Mais vous allez voir que c'est pas évident. J'ai appris et petit à petit, on apprend de soi-même aussi. Au bout d'un moment, au début, c'est un peu délicat parce que bon, le travail est un peu difficile, mais après, on prend goût à ce travail-là. Voilà. Notre nouvelle machine de sciage. En une semaine, c'est parce qu'on a eu le problème, c'est qu'il y a de l'eau qui arrive et la machine ne peut pas travailler dans l'eau. Donc on perd du temps à cause de l'eau qui arrive. Mais que ce soit ici, que ce soit à côté, que ce soit à l'autre côté, c'est exact. Il y a toujours de l'eau parce que si elle n'arrive pas comme ça, elle arrive du plafond. Donc, voilà, on évolue, ce qui est bien dans un sens, parce que travailler comme il y a 22 ans, je crois qu'il y a beaucoup de personnes qui ne travailleraient plus. Parce que se taper, se mettre 6 mois, 4 mois, 6 mois dans une galerie d'un mètre 30, je crois qu'il n'y a plus beaucoup de personnes qui le feront. Donc l'investissement de la machine est une bonne chose pour moi. Ça soulage. Ça nous ennuie parce qu'on a travaillé pour l'extraire et quand on voit qu'elles sont cassées ou quoi que ce soit, ou même nous, si par malheur on en casse une, ben voilà, le travail qui a été fourni pour sortir cette pierre-là, ben ça nous fait mal.
I think the London Design Festival is interesting to think about what constitutes a design object or what a design project, where its value lies. And I think, you know, as a visitor to a museum, you know, you're interested in a design as a prototype object or something that, you know, might be about to go to market and is pioneering as a new piece of technology or something that's consumable in some way. And I think maybe those are the sort of objects that are very easy to understand as a sort of finished, completed piece of work that's ready to be communicated. And I think what's more challenging, but maybe more important, is to think about the way that we do things rather than just what it is that you end up with. And I think what's nice about the Aston Webb stones being brought back to Exhibition Road, but to show off their joints, to see the lettering that indicates the course codes as produced by the masons in 1909, the traces of the mortar, the additional holes drilled and marks produced by the stonemasons of PAYE taking the screen apart. What's interesting is actually like showing the work in progress. What I hope is that it indicates the importance of thinking about not just what a finished object is, but also how we do it and the attitude we have to materials, and to think about them much more in terms of process, time and care, rather than just on an aesthetic level, like what colour stone you like or something that's as arbitrary as that, really. So I hope that people will enjoy the oddness of seeing the workings, you know, and the fact that these are in a state of pause rather than being a finished, completed thing. All we've done is really given them a bit of a brush up, clean them off, chip off the worst of the mortar so they're a bit flatter and more generous to sit on. But other than that, they're ready to be used for another 100,000, 10,000 years. And we hope that we, you know, are making the case through this project to drive to reuse materials and to revalue stone in a contemporary sense. It tends to be rather overlooked and undervalued, and we hope we can change that a bit.